travel each bend in the road. People who meet in this road.
The first thing we usually go over is the mission statement. All of us have read it several times now, and I think given the timeline we're on, we will just skip that. We are going to open the regular board meeting. If there are citizens who wish to speak, I assume there are not. All right. And so welcome to all of you who are here, and let's get going. The minutes of the special meeting of June 15th and the regular meeting of August 25th and September 8th are open for discussion or motion, or both.
I move approval of item 4.1, minutes from the regular meeting of August 25th and September 8th, 2016.
Second?
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Now we have the removal of the items from the agenda and the development of the consent agenda. And our president is, our college president is leading us through this new process.
Okay, so we don't have any items to remove from the agenda,
Okay.
5.1, and then we'll develop the consent agenda itself. And for those of you that are not familiar with this process, what we do when we develop the consent agenda is pull out anything that needs some exceptional discussion or items that are unusual or potentially controversial that need further discussion. And then once we pull those out, anything left over will be voted on by consent in a general fashion and approved or such on that basis. And so we decided that we're not going to pull out any agenda item. So all of the items, with the exception of the two measures, I 2016 and J 2016 from the Unified School District, which is a resolution, will stay, and you'll have to vote on that separately, but everything else then would go on consent.
Right. Peter?
Question, what would trigger your action to remove something from the consent agenda? What goes through your mind?
Well, if there's some kind of a date issue or some kind of an accuracy issue, for example, I would want to pull that because obviously it would need to be modified before you would vote on it. The other thing is that you all will decide if something needs to be removed to have further explanation. So what we're typically doing when we put the consent agenda together is we're looking at things that are non-controversial, routine in nature, and would not be controversial. So that's kind of my kind of general rule of thumb. If it's controversial or it needs further explanation or it's non-routine, non-standard, then you all would want to have that pulled potentially and have a further explanation for it. And then the nice part about it is that we're not having explanation on these rather routine items, so we can take the time and focus on the things that are of significance for you. Does that help?
Yeah, no, I really, what might be seen as a trigger for one person may not be a trigger for another, but I think it behooves us as trustees to actually look at the specific elements of a consent agenda, and if something there does trouble you or piques your curiosity or might be controversial if acted upon, I think we have an obligation to withdraw that.
Absolutely.
Well, and just to add to that, Peter, I appreciate that it's Friday, so I think a lot of things can be hashed out prior to, because I think our president and staff have a lot of background knowledge that sometimes we don't, so I think that this has really freed us up to have time to talk about high-level policy conversations and move things along. So thank you for doing that, Angie.
So the question then is, are there any items on the consent agenda that any board member would prefer to have withdrawn for individual discussion. All right, so obviously we will go with the consent agenda, and that then covers everything on the agenda that is left from what we have done. Hi, Craig. We vote on those as a total,
Right.
unless, as I said, we pull something that you wish to discuss. So I would entertain a motion.
I move adoption of the consent agenda.
Second?
Right? It's been moved and seconded that the consent agenda be adopted. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Right?
Okay.
Now, we can adjourn in a very short order, and I would remind you that there is a reception this evening, and I hope you can all go.
We do have the resolution.
Yes, we do.
So, in your packets, we presented you a resolution for two measures from the Santa Barbara Unified School District relating to facilities at the school district. And these measures, one is Measure I 2016 and the other one is J 2016, are both about repairing, upgrading facilities at the Unified School District. And it's not just about upgrading the actual facilities, but it's also entailing things such as security upgrades and other things of that nature. Some of the buildings in the Unified School District are 80-plus years old and deteriorating and need repairs dramatically. Actually, one of the high schools is the third oldest high school in the state of California. And so these two measures that we've requested that you consider for a resolution are about the facilities at the Unified School District.
Is there a motion so we could discuss this?
Motion to pass the resolution?
Second.
Thank you, Craig. All right, is there discussion? Peter?
Are there any fiscal issues that would pertain to Santa Barbara Community College District involved in this?
No, these would be completely separate from what.
Right. So we're not contributing to it financially.
Good point.
What
No.
this does is to support the Santa Barbara elementary schools in terms of their request for community funding or for a bond measure?
Bond measure, yeah, a bond measure. I 2016 is a bond measure for 135 million, and J 2016 is a bond measure for 58 million. And both for this whole idea of upgrading facilities.
Good.
Are there any comments or questions? Right. We'll vote on this resolution. Actually, it's two resolutions, but it's the same goal, which is to support the Unified School Districts and their building upgrades. All those in favor? Oh, Craig, you want to make a?
Yeah, as a board, we've approved various measures on different subjects that amounted to like supporting other things going on outside of that don't directly affect us and that we don't directly contribute financially to. The only questions I have at all is what impact does our support of this actually have or have the potential to do? And I don't know that there's a good answer to it. Any comments on that regard?
Well, it's basically a vote of unity. We know that the students that are coming out of the Unified School District, 40% of them will come here to City College. And if they have a good learning environment, in the K-12 system and can prosper there. They can be a better student when they get here. And so I think just by that in itself, it's worth supporting a better learning environment in the K-12 system.
I would concur.
And then we share all the dual enrollment students.
Mm-hmm.
I think to a large measure, just as with the consent agenda, much of this is based on trust, that someone has carefully examined the needs of the elementary school district or part of the unified school district and come to the conclusion that it is in education's best interest to provide this kind of support. And you're closer to it than anybody. Do you want to comment?
No, other than I did notice, reading through the ballot that we all got in the mail, it does include the purchase of the Armory building, which is the property in between Santa Barbara Junior High and Santa Barbara High School. And I think that the benefit for Santa Barbara City College is just the potential for further pathways, career technical education. I just think that really, there's something there in terms of a vision for our students here at the college and our students locally. But I mean, that's our biggest assets here in Santa Barbara, is that our school districts have property. And I mean, we struggle with similar facility issues, I think. I teach at Roosevelt, so we are a little newer renovated, so I don't have perhaps the facility needs in my classroom.
But there was a time when Roosevelt was in dire need, and this community came together and provided the resources
Right.
with which Roosevelt was reconstructed.
Very beautifully to look at the ocean and the mission. Yeah. No, I mean, Santa Barbara, have you driven by Santa Barbara Junior High?
Oh, yes.
Santa Barbara High School. The wood at McKinley, gosh, it's just, you don't build like that anymore. So the district is very fortunate to have these historical landmarks. The Luke Theater, the junior high, which is a private foundation. But so yeah, Craig, I think.
Any other comments? Then I assume we're ready to vote. This calls for a roll call.
Trustee Nielsen,
Aye.
Trustee Gallardo,
Aye.
Trustee Haslam,
Aye.
Trustee Aboud,
Aye.
Trustee Kugler,
Aye.
Student Trustee Gribble.
Aye.
Thank you. And we have passed these resolutions, which is a very nice opportunity for you to share with the school district.
I certainly will.
And they've supported us a lot, so I'm delighted that we did this. Thank you. Well, as far as I know, we have one more thing and then we will be finished. But this is a pretty important one, as you have noticed. There's been a lot of discussion of it. And I think it's one of the most exciting beginnings I've seen a college president do, was that survey.
So, yeah, we've talked about the survey to a certain extent. And the intent of the survey itself was, since I'm new to Santa Barbara, I wanted to give an opportunity for faculty, staff, administrators, and students, and the community to be able to send me comments about their feelings related to the college. And there was no intent of this being scientific by any means, and I need to make sure that I'm clear with everyone about that. This is a survey that is really kind of more of a temperature gauge than anything else. So you can't put a whole bunch of meaning in the results of a survey like this, but it does give you some indication of things that are important to various groups. And overall, I was absolutely impressed with how much the community loves this college and how much they care about this college, or it cares about this college. And overall, we received 675 total responses. 429 of those responses came from community members, 111 from faculty and staff, and 135 from students. And those were self-identified categories. So, I mean, we didn't check, whether or not they fit in those, technically or whatever. But it was a good response. Small when you think about the overall size of Santa Barbara, 675 versus a population of 90,000 plus. So, you have to keep all of that into consideration. But I asked them basically 5 different questions. The first one was, and these were open-ended, the first one was, if you were the new SBCC president, what would you do? And then, we gathered up that information and ranked them, and we came up with restore adult education as one of the top items, find the optimal size of the college, improve college services, and for the most part, they were talking about the admissions process, make it easier, like a 1, 2, 3 kind of process. Listen to faculty, staff, and the community in terms of making sure that we get input from folks, and connect with the community. Those are some of the top areas. I also asked them what are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that SBCC faces. And for the most part, the answers here, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but the answers are answers that we're familiar with and predictable. Strengths were things like we have a strong faculty, we have a great reputation, quality instruction, and of course a beautiful location. Weaknesses, adult education came up, and they basically talked about the idea that we don't have adult education. Well, there's a little bit of a misconception there because we actually do have adult education. It's not the size that it was at one time, but we do have adult education. And then, of course, things like parking and lack of housing, things like that we already are very much aware of are potential weaknesses for the college. Opportunities talked about things like reconnecting with the community, and we're already working very, very hard to do that and having some good success and enjoying doing that. Also things like build on the SBCC Foundation Promise program, which has exceeded all expectations, and we're already doing that, which is so fantastic. Some threats, housing came up again, parking came up again, some of those kinds of things that we're familiar with. One, though, threat that was talked about is actually the top of the threat list, relates to growth. And this, again, is one of these areas that there's a misconception about in the community, and I'm going to be taking full responsibility for making sure that we get some of these misconceptions cleared up. But for example, we have not been growing, as you know well, in this district since 09-10. And so we've actually been declining in enrollment and population size of the college. And so that's a misconception that just needs to be cleared up. We were growing at one time, but we're not now. So those are things that I think are really good in terms of just information that we can address and clear up relative to the perceptions of the community related to the college. And I think I'm going to stop there because we can go on and on and on with all of this, but I think you get the general point. Any questions about that? Comments?
Well, I remember the original discussion in your office, and I don't recall ever that you said that this was anything like a scientific survey. And representations to the contrary, I guess, just weren't there. So if it isn't scientific, it's something else. It can be useful. You suggested the term temperature, to take the temperature of the community. And I think that's probably an accurate rendering, because nothing that you have mentioned so far comes as a surprise in terms of the kind of feedback that I've gotten from community leaders and members. So I think it was a useful exercise. At least it was an interesting way to say hello to the community of Santa Barbara. And I think if we had expected something other than that, I'm not sure what it would have been. So,
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo Peter's. I definitely appreciated the results because, again, it told us that these are things that we had been hearing about in multiple contexts, whether it was joint city council meetings, joint board meetings with our local school district in our communities with our constituents. So it was a reminder that we addressed some serious goals this last time for this coming year, and it was a good reminder that our board is in tune with the community because I feel like our board goals definitely aligned with some of this feedback. So I like the SWOT. You know, I know it's in education, it's not a familiar methodology, but, you know, I had to do it actually myself when I was doing the reading specialist, and people at my school site were like, what is, you know, and I had to look at, well, what are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to our students when you're looking at literacy outcomes? And for the literacy folks, it was like, why are we doing this? And so when I saw this, I thought this is actually very useful and very innovative, and I think a lot of people are using that model. In fact, when I sent out the survey to friends and different people in the community, people replied back, oh, a SWOT, SMART, ... You know, and so a lot of people knew what you were doing, and so I appreciate that. So thank you for taking the time and the lengthy hours to really look at it, because it was useful.
You bet. Thank you for that.
As far as upcoming meetings, we have the regularly scheduled meetings, and we have some future things that we're going to have to look at. But at this moment, unless there's something else on the agenda or that you feel we need to address, we are ready to adjourn. Yes, Emily.
I have a quick question regarding the survey. Just had a couple students just come up to me in concern, knowing that it wasn't taken or wasn't intended to have any, you know, scientific method behind it and whatnot. That's what I have been trying to explain. But I think that one of the questions that a lot of the student body would like answered is how much will this be referenced when handling, you know, clearly, you know, student housing is a problem, clearly, you know, transfer missions are a problem, community outreach is a problem. So how, if it holds no scientific, you know, procedure and method, how often will it be referenced when handling these situations?
I think we have to be cautious about referencing it too much because of the reasons that I described in terms of the research kind of methodology that's been established with this. It really is a small n when it gets into comparing, you know, the overall population that we have here and the feedback that we received. And then also we know that when people take surveys, it's just like if you go on a trip and you're on an airline and everything goes well, then typically you don't think about reaching for some kind of a survey card. But if things don't go well, then you tend to want to get, you know, get your voice in there and complain or whatever. So my point here is that certain types of feedback is generated by certain kinds of populations that we have that took the survey itself. So you have to be cautious with how we use it. I'm not planning on referencing it extensively. I think it's, as Trustee Haslam pointed out, it's something that you can have, you know, as an additional input, but, you know, as far as a decision-making tool or something like that, I think that would probably put too much emphasis on the survey itself. That's my take.
Greg?
Yes, I'd like to thank Emily for bringing that up. Very good question. Very, very good. But at the same time, I didn't see points on here that we hadn't already been, topics that we weren't already discussing and concerned about and working on. It does, although it is not scientific, it does back up that we really need to be concerned about these points. Even if we're doing well, we need to work on our ability to communicate. When I saw those questions about, you know, we don't have adult education, state-funded adult education, so that was qualified. I wasn't aware that we didn't have any state-funded adult education, and we do have it. So apparently we haven't communicated at least that fact to at least some portion of the community out there. So, you know, it's really good to have any kind of feedback. It's much better than having no feedback.
Right.
And especially the critical feedback is good. It makes us re-examine and check ourselves, and we're here for the students. Thank you.
And what you just were discussing, Craig, I think is what supports the use of opinion surveys. Opinion surveys can happen much faster, as you all know, than a scientific study can. And if their results are confirmed by other things, i.e., other things that have come up that say the same thing, and in this case, for example, because I worked on the MESA project, the MESA folks and their list of things they wanted fixed and changed fits it very closely. And then you've mentioned some things that also did. Then you begin to know that an opinion survey is useful. It is not the same as a scientific survey. It also does not cost multi thousands of dollars. And sometimes getting the different things together gives you a better picture than an opinion survey, even if it's scientific. Is there anything else that we need to be thinking about?
You've got it.
Thank you very much. And again, as I was reminding you, there is a reception if you have a chance to come. I know that this is a celebration of Anthony's arrival. If he has too many more celebrations, he'll know he has to stay.
I think this is
So, so thank you very much for coming. We are adjourned.